Kickstarter is a platform with a pretty notorious reputation, between mismanaged projects to straight-up scams. This website has become one of the many hated platforms in the game industry. So, considering that, you would think any honest game dev would simply avoid this website like the plague, aiming for something more virtuous, like loan sharks or something. But obviously the reality is a little bit more nuanced than that, and today we're going to unpack why they do still use this website, so that hopefully you'll understand the industry just a little bit better and be a bit less judgmental towards studios who do go this route. So here's why game studios still use Kickstarter. Unfortunately, money makes the world go round, and in order to make video games, you need a lot of it. You have to pay yourself, for one, and if you have any employees, that expense suddenly compounds. Add on licensing for consoles, game engines, development software, hardware, utility bills, accountants, lawyers, you name it. Even the most cost-conscious person could easily find themselves with a blown-out budget way beyond what they can handle.
Fozzie, do you realize that if we don't find this money, we'll have lost everything we've worked for?
Does it help that I feel really badly?
So what's the best way to get that money? That's right. Investors. What, did you think I was going to say Kickstarter? Hell no. Kickstarter is a huge gamble, and even a successful campaign will most likely leave you woefully underfunded, especially if you're bad at budgeting and severely underestimate your actual long-term expenses. Investors, on the other hand, can give you huge piles of cash right up front. The gamble is now on their end, and as long as you have a good contract, then at least you know things will be mostly fine, even if it doesn't work out. Plus, if you do run out of money, you can convince them to give you even more money, since they've already invested so much, and even the richest people fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy. Unfortunately, convincing investors to invest is pretty difficult, especially if you're a brand new studio like Once Lost Games, for example. Founded by the three original devs who made Arena and Daggerfall, Ted Peterson, Julian LaFay, and Eric Eberling. They're currently working on a spiritual successor to Daggerfall, and if you haven't seen it, it's called The Wayward Realms, and it looks awesome. So, what do you do when your game studio is struggling to convince investors that your project is worth funding? Well, you accrue evidence. Evidence that proves they should invest in you, and believe it or not, Kickstarter is the perfect place to do it. Investors want to know that people will pay for your game, and if you have a big pile of money thrown at you from thirsty gamers, that can be rather convincing. But they also want to know that you know what you're doing and are dedicated to actually making the game, which means you need something considerable to show them, and that means having time already invested in making the game. And of course, time is money. But without money, you won't be able to afford the time. Kickstarter campaigns help studios fund themselves while they plug away at their projects until it's finally good enough to show off. As a matter of fact, it's not uncommon for investors to straight up tell you to go to Kickstarter first, which means in some cases a studio has to do Kickstarter, if they want that money at least. But this leads me to a counter argument that I've seen on literally every Kickstarter announcement, and if I don't talk about it here, I'm gonna see it in my comment section. And if I see this in my comment section, I will die. Which is why don't they just sell shares of their company instead? At least then people will get something of value with their purchase. Which, as it turns out, would be a terrible idea. For one, not everybody wants to be a publicly traded company selling their creative freedom and souls to a bunch of rich bozos who could potentially fire all of you on a whim and replace you with some other rich bozo, completely ruining your project and putting you back at square one. But even if you did want that for some reason, unfortunately, your shares are in essence worthless. After all, you're a business that already can't convince rich people to invest in. They're not buying your shares. And it's certainly not worthwhile for anybody else, because in order for shares to be worthwhile, you need to buy a lot of them. Thousands of dollars at a minimum. And that's with the caveat that you wouldn't even be getting a copy of the game, because trying to give every investor a copy would be way more difficult to manage on your own than it is through a middleman like Kickstarter, especially since there's a lot of different ways to invest in a company. But there is a much bigger issue with this, which is the studio might not even get a cent of your money. After all, if the shares you purchased are being sold by another stock investor, then it's them who gets all of it. And that means your goodwill investment was entirely pointless. With Kickstarter on their hand, you know that the company is getting your money. Now, whether they use it wisely is another problem, but at least they had the opportunity. So yeah, selling shares is a stupid idea in this situation. The reality is, despite all the bad press and scummy businesses out there, Kickstarter has been a godsend for both gamers and game developers. We're currently living in a renaissance of well-funded indie games thanks to Kickstarter. Pathfinder Kingmaker, Uden Chronicle, Pillars of Eternity, Psychonauts Psychonauts 2, Star Citizen. I'm just kidding, not that one. A world without it would be the real dystopia, in my opinion. By the way, if you're interested in what Once Lost Games has been up to, you can find a link to their website and the Kickstarter campaign down below. The campaign itself is technically ended, but you can still pledge if you want to. After all, every cent helps. They've been working on this for a while, and honestly, I'm more interested in it than I am for TES 6. And not just because Starfield was bad. I actually intended for this to go up when the campaign started, but that obviously didn't happen. Whatever. With that said, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.